The first-class cabin of Zenith Airlines Flight 714, bound for New York, hummed with the quiet luxury of wealth and privilege. Soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers, the scent of expensive leather mingled with freshly brewed coffee, and the gentle murmur of conversations in hushed tones filled the air. Among the elite passengers, one figure sat quietly by the window, his presence almost unremarkable to the casual observer. He was a man of medium build, with a distinguished, silver-flecked beard that framed a face etched with the lines of profound thought and experience. His eyes, deep-set and intelligent, held the wisdom of decades, observing the world with a calm, almost serene detachment. His clothes were simple, yet impeccably tailored, a dark, unassuming suit of fine wool that seemed designed to blend into the plush surroundings rather than stand out. He carried no ostentatious jewelry, no flashy watch, just a quiet dignity that was easily overlooked by those accustomed to more overt displays of power. This was President Ibrahim of the Republic of Zandere nation, rapidly rising as an economic and political powerhouse in Africa, and a man whose influence stretched far beyond its borders, touching the lives of millions and shaping global policy. Ibrahim, despite his immense power, the constant demands of his office, and the perpetual scrutiny that came with being a world leader, cherished these rare moments of anonymity. He had insisted on flying commercial for this particular trip, a personal decision born of a desire to experience the world outside the presidential bubble, to feel the pulse of ordinary life, even if only for a few hours. It was a practice he maintained whenever possible, a way to keep himself grounded and connected to the common man he served. His security detail, a small, discreet team of highly trained operatives, was scattered throughout the cabin, blending in seamlessly with the other passengers, their watchful eyes constantly scanning, yet never betraying their purpose. As the pre-flight boarding announcements droned on, a flight attendant, a young woman named Chloe, with a perpetually harried expression and a forced, almost brittle smile, approached his row. She was clearly overwhelmed by the demands of the first-class passengers, many of whom were already making their presence known with various, often trivial, requests. Chloe moved with a frantic energy, her movements jerky, her attention fragmented. "Sir, can I get you anything?" Chloe asked, her voice a little too loud for the subdued cabin, a little too rushed, as if she were reciting a memorized line. She barely made eye contact, her gaze already flitting to the next row, where a woman in an oversized fur coat was impatiently tapping her foot. Ibrahim, ever the picture of politeness, offered a gentle smile. "A glass of still water, please, and perhaps a newspaper, if one is available. An international edition, if possible." Chloe nodded curtly, her pen already poised over her notepad. "Water, got it. Newspapers are usually distributed after takeoff, but I'll see what I can do." Her tone implied a favor, not a service. She turned on her heel before he could respond, already moving towards the fur-clad passenger who was now loudly complaining about the cabin temperature. Ibrahim watched her go, a faint amusement playing at the corners of his lips. He was used to being treated with reverence, surrounded by aides and security who anticipated his every need, often before he even voiced it. This casual dismissal, this almost dismissive efficiency, was a refreshing, if slightly jarring, change. It was a stark reminder of how different life was outside the gilded cage of presidential protocol. He found himself intrigued by the raw, unfiltered, human interaction. Minutes later, Chloe returned, not with a chilled glass, but with a plastic cup of water, condensation beating on its sides. She placed it on his tray table with a clatter that seemed disproportionately loud in the quiet cabin, and hurried off, without a word. Ibrahim simply took a sip, the water lukewarm, and continued to observe the other passengers, a silent anthropologist in the microcosm of the first-class cabin. Across the aisle, a boisterous businessman, in a loud, pinstripe suit, was already on his second glass of premium champagne, loudly demanding a specific vintage that wasn't on the menu. Further back, a socialite draped in diamonds was complaining to another flight attendant about the quality of the caviar, her voice a theatrical whisper that carried through the cabin. The first-class cabin, it seemed, was less about genuine comfort and more about asserting status, a theatrical stage for the affluent to perform their perceived importance. The flight took off, climbing smoothly into the sky, the roar of the engines a comforting hum. The seatbelt sign pinged off, and the cabin crew began their meal service. Chloe, still looking stressed and visibly annoyed by the constant demands, arrived at Ibrahim's row, pushing a trolley laden with gleaming silver platters. "Meal service, sir. What would you like?" She rattled off the options quickly, her voice devoid of inflection, not waiting for him to process them. We have the pan-seared salmon with asparagus, the beef tenderloin with truffle mashed potatoes, or the vegetarian pasta with roasted vegetables. Ibrahim, who had a preference for simpler, healthier fare, politely asked, "Is there a fresh fruit plate available? Or perhaps a light green salad with a simple vinaigrette?" He knew that most airlines, even in first class, had contingency options for dietary preferences, especially for long flights. Chloe sighed, a theatrical puff of air that was clearly meant to convey her exasperation. "Sir, those are not on the first-class menu. We have what I just listed. This is a premium service, not a diner where you can order off." Her tone was now openly impatient, bordering on condescending. She tapped her pen against her notepad, an impatient rhythm. "I understand the menu options," Ibrahim said, his voice still calm, though a faint shadow of disappointment crossed his features. "However, sometimes, for passengers with specific dietary preferences or health considerations, alternatives can be arranged. I simply prefer something lighter for this flight." Chloe rolled her eyes, a gesture she clearly thought went unnoticed, but which was caught by a few discerning eyes nearby. "Sir, if you wanted a special meal, you should have pre-ordered it at least 24 hours in advance. We can't just whip up a fruit plate out of thin air in the galley. This is a premium service, not a short-order cook's kitchen." Her voice had a sharp edge now, a clear implication that he was being unreasonable. A ripple of discomfort went through the passengers in the immediate vicinity. Some shot sympathetic, almost apologetic glances at Ibrahim, recognizing the subtle yet undeniable disrespect. Others just looked away, embarrassed for him, or perhaps for the flight attendant. Ibrahim, however, remained composed, his expression unreadable. He had faced far greater provocations in his political career. "Very well," he said, his voice losing a touch of its warmth, a subtle shift that only those who knew him intimately would detect. "I will have the vegetarian pasta." Then Chloe scribbled it down with exaggerated flourish and moved on, muttering under her breath about demanding passengers who think they own the plane. Her words, though low, were audible to Ibrahim's security detail, whose faces tightened imperceptibly. They exchanged uneasy glances, their hands subtly shifting closer to their concealed weapons. They were trained to protect him from physical threats, but this kind of casual disrespect, while not a direct threat, was deeply unsettling. They knew the immense power he wielded, the respect he commanded on the global stage. To see him treated like an inconvenience by a young, inexperienced flight attendant was almost unbearable. They had to remind themselves of his explicit instructions. "No interference unless there is a direct and immediate threat to my personal safety." As the flight progressed, the subtle slights continued, escalating from dismissiveness to outright neglect. Ibrahim's polite requests for a blanket were met with a dismissive "we" rerunning low. "You'll have to wait," even though he could see several neatly folded blankets in an overhead bin just a few rows away. His empty water glass remained unfilled for an extended period, even as Chloe diligently refilled the glasses of other, more vocal passengers. When he finally managed to flag her down to ask for it to be refilled, she sighed dramatically, and brought him another plastic cup, leaving it on the edge of his tray table without a word. When he asked for the in-flight entertainment system to be reset due to a persistent glitch, Chloe told him to try turning it off and on again. "Sir, that usually fixes it," with a condescending smirk, before walking away to attend to a celebrity passenger. Ibrahim, despite the mounting frustration, maintained his composure. He understood the nature of service, the pressures of the job, but he also understood respect, and the lack of it was becoming increasingly apparent. He wondered if it was his quiet demeanor, his unassuming attire, or perhaps something else entirely that led to this treatment. He chose to observe, to learn. Meanwhile, in the economy section, a different kind of drama was unfolding, one that would soon intersect with the quiet indignities of the first-class cabin. General Anya Sharma, the formidable head of Xander's military intelligence, a woman whose strategic brilliance was matched only by her unwavering loyalty to President Tariq, was stuck in a middle seat, fuming. Her connecting flight had been severely delayed due to unforeseen weather, forcing her onto this commercial flight, and her usual private jet arrangements had been impossible to secure on such short notice. She was tired, irritable, and acutely aware that she was missing crucial updates from her team regarding a sensitive regional security matter. Her secure satellite phone, which she had been trying to use for work, suddenly died, its battery indicator blinking a final, mocking red. She flagged down a flight attendant, a kind-faced older woman named Margaret, who seemed far more experienced and empathetic than Chloe. "Excuse me, ma'am," Anya said, her voice clipped with urgency. "Do you have a power bank or a charger I could borrow? My phone just died, and I have urgent work to do. It's a matter of national security." Margaret nodded sympathetically. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, I understand. We do have a few, but they're usually reserved for first-class passengers. Let me check if any are available. I'll be right back." Anya sighed, a frustrated exhale. Of course. First class. Always first class. She knew Ibrahim was in first class. He would undoubtedly have a charger, or access to one. But she couldn't just walk up there and demand it, not without breaking his cover and potentially causing a scene. She respected his desire for anonymity. As Margaret went to check, Anya overheard a snippet of conversation from a passenger nearby, complaining loudly to their seatmate about the rude African man in first class who was being difficult about his meal and making a fuss. Anya's ears perked up, her military training instantly recognizing a potential anomaly. Rude African man, she thought, her brow furrowing. That sounded suspiciously like her president. Ibrahim Touré was many things, but rude was not one of them. If someone was calling him rude, it meant they were being disrespectful. And likely, Anya, a woman who had commanded armies, negotiated with world leaders, and faced down armed insurgents without blinking, felt a slow burn of anger begin to ignite within her. She knew Ibrahim's quiet nature, his profound humility, his unwavering patience. He was never rude. If he was being perceived as such, it was a clear indication of a failure on the part of the service provider. Just then, Margaret returned, shaking her head apologetically. "I'm afraid all the first-class chargers are currently in use, ma'am. I'm truly sorry." Anya's patience, already stretched, thin, snapped. "In use, or reserved for people who aren't difficult," she muttered, loud enough to be heard by Margaret and the surrounding passengers. She stood up, her military bearing evident even in the cramped aisle, her posture radiating an almost palpable intensity. "Excuse me, I need to stretch my legs." She began to walk purposefully towards the front of the plane, her eyes scanning the first-class cabin with a predator's focus. And there he was, President Ibrahim Touré, sitting by the window, calmly reading a magazine he had apparently found himself, his untouched vegetarian pasta sitting forlornly on his tray table. And then she saw Chloe, the young flight attendant, leaning over another passenger, laughing loudly at a joke, completely ignoring Ib, whose water glass was once again empty. Anya's fury, usually a controlled, strategic force, began to boil over. She had seen men tremble before Ibrahim's quiet authority, seen nations bend to his will, seen the most hardened diplomats defer to his wisdom. To witness him being treated with such blatant disregard and casual contempt by a mere flight attendant was an affront she could not tolerate. It was an insult not just to him, but to the nation he represented, and to the very principles of respect and dignity he embodied. She reached Ibrahim's seat, her presence radiating an almost palpable intensity that caused the air around her to thicken. Chloe, finally noticing the approaching figure, straightened up, her forced smile faltering as she met Anya's piercing gaze. "Is everything all right here, sir?" Anya asked Ibrahim, her voice a low growl, her eyes never leaving Chloe, who suddenly felt a chill despite the warm cabin. Ibrahim looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes as he saw Anya, then a faint, knowing smile touched his lips. "General Sharma," he said, his voice calm, a pleasant surprise indeed, though I confess, I was enjoying my anonymity. "Not entirely, Mr. President," Anya replied, her voice still dangerously low, a barely contained storm. She then turned her full, undivided attention to Chloe, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made the young flight attendant instinctively take a step back. "And you? What exactly is your problem?" Chloe, taken completely aback by Anya's sudden appearance and her authoritative, almost accusatory tone, stammered, her composure crumbling. "Excuse me, who are you? This is first class, you can't just—" "I asked you a question," Anya cut her off, her voice like steel, each word a hammer blow. "What is your problem with this passenger?" She gestured to Ibrahim, her hand sweeping in a dismissive arc towards Chloe. "He's being difficult," Chloe whined, trying to regain some semblance of control, her voice cracking. "He's demanding special meals, and being generally he just doesn't understand the rules of first class." Anya's face hardened, her jaw clenching, demanding, uncooperative. "This man, young lady," she stated, her voice rising now, carrying through the cabin, is President Ibrahim of the Republic of Zambia. He is one of the most powerful and respected leaders on the African continent, a man who commands the attention of world leaders, who has brokered peace treaties, and who has lifted millions of his people out of poverty. And you, a mere flight attendant, have seen fit to treat him with utter contempt and disrespect, to deny him basic courtesy, and to accuse him of being difficult. The words hit Chloe like a physical blow. Her face went from pale to ashen, then to a blotchy red. Her eyes darted wildly to Ibrahim, then back to Anya, a dawning horror spreading across her features. As the full weight of her egregious error crashed down on her, the other first-class passengers, who had been listening with increasing interest and discomfort, gasped. The boisterous businessman choked on his champagne, his face turning purple. The socialite dropped her caviar spoon with a clatter, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her mouth. Whispers erupted, a shocked murmur filling the cabin as the realization spread like wildfire. The cabin manager, a portly man named Mr. Davies, who had been alerted by the sudden commotion, and the rising volume of Anya's voice, rushed over, his face a picture of frantic concern. "What in the world is going on here?" he demanded, his voice shrill with panic. "What's going on, Mr. Davies?" Anya stated, her voice now calm, but laced with an undeniable authority that brooked no argument. "Is that your flight attendant, Ms. Chloe, has just committed a grave diplomatic incident by disrespecting the head of state of a sovereign nation, a nation that happens to be a significant economic partner to this airline's home country." Mr. Davies' eyes widened in disbelief as he looked from Anya, whose military bearing was now unmistakable, to Ibrahim, who was now trembling uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. He had seen General Sharma's picture on international news reports, though he hadn't connected her to the quiet, unassuming man by the window. The full, terrifying realization hit him like a freight train, knocking the air from his lungs. "President," Mr. Davies whispered, his voice barely audible, his face turning a ghastly shade of white. He had seen Ibrahim's picture on international news, a man of immense stature and influence, but he had never imagined him flying commercial, let alone in his first-class cabin, being treated with such appalling disregard. Ibrahim, who had been observing the unfolding scene with a detached, almost academic air, now spoke, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through the stunned silence. "Indeed, Mr. Davies, and I must say, the service in your first-class cabin leaves much to be desired, especially when compared to the standards of hospitality I have come to expect from a reputable international airline." Mr. Davies looked at Chloe, then back at Ibrahim, his mind racing, calculating the immense damage control that would be required. The implications of this incident were enormous. A formal complaint from President Tory could lead to a diplomatic crisis, severe repercussions for Zenith Airlines, a potential loss of lucrative contracts, and certainly the immediate end of his own career. "Chloe, is this true?" Mr. Davies asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and barely suppressed rage. Chloe, utterly humiliated and consumed by shame, could only nod, speechless, her head bowed. "Get out of my sight," Mr. Davies hissed at her, his voice low and furious, barely audible to anyone but Chloe. "Go to the galley. Immediately. You are suspended pending a full investigation." Chloe, her face blotchy with tears and shame, scurried away, her forced smile a distant, painful memory. Mr. Davies then turned to Ibrahim, bowing deeply, his hands clasped together in supplication, a gesture of profound humility. "Mr. President, please accept my sincerest, most profound apologies on behalf of Zenith Airlines and my entire crew. I am utterly mortified by this egregious lapse in service and respect. This is completely unacceptable. I assure you, this will be dealt with severely, and we will take every measure to ensure such an incident never happens again. Is there anything at all we can do to make your flight more comfortable, to rectify this appalling situation?" Ibrahim looked at him, his expression unreadable, a faint glint in his eyes that might have been amusement, or perhaps a test, a fresh fruit plate, perhaps, and a selection of international newspapers, and a quiet, respectful service for the remainder of the flight. He said, a faint hint of irony in his voice, "Immediately, Mr. President, immediately." Mr. Davies stammered, already pulling out his comms device to summon the most senior flight attendant on board, his voice a frantic whisper. Within minutes, a flurry of activity erupted around Ibrahim's seat. The most senior flight attendant, a seasoned professional named Eleanor, arrived, her face a picture of genuine concern and regret. She personally brought him a beautifully arranged fruit platter, a selection of international newspapers, and a fresh pot of herbal tea, brewed to perfection. She apologized profusely, her words heartfelt and sincere, expressing her personal dismay at the treatment he had received. Other members of the cabin crew, now fully aware of the identity of their quiet passenger, approached with genuine deference, their previous indifference replaced by meticulous care. They offered apologies, refilled his water glass with chilled, bottled water, and ensured his every need was met with meticulous care and quiet efficiency. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted dramatically. The other passengers, initially amused or uncomfortable, were now openly impressed, some even approaching Ibrahim to express their respect and admiration, a few even offering their own apologies for not intervening sooner. Anya, satisfied that the situation was under control and that her president was finally receiving the respect he deserved, returned to her seat in economy, a triumphant glint in her eyes. She knew Ibrahim preferred to handle such matters with quiet diplomacy, but sometimes a more direct and forceful approach was necessary to cut through arrogance and ignorance. For the remainder of the flight, President Touré was treated with the utmost respect and attention. The untouched vegetarian pasta was discreetly removed, replaced by a gourmet meal prepared specifically for him by the onboard chef, who was now in a state of nervous excitement and culinary overdrive, determined to impress the head of state. Upon arrival at JFK, a full diplomatic reception awaited President Touré, a stark contrast to his unassuming arrival at the airport earlier. As he disembarked, flanked by General Sharma and his security detail, he was met by ambassadors, high-ranking security personnel, and a throng of eager reporters, all vying for a glimpse of the powerful African leader. Mr. Davies, the cabin manager, stood at the jet bridge, looking utterly distraught, his face pale and drawn. As Ibrahim passed him, he bowed again, deeply, his head almost touching his chest. Ibrahim paused, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on his face. "Mr. Davies," he said, his voice kind, yet firm, "I trust the remainder of your flight was uneventful for all your passengers." Mr. Davies stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, Mr. President. And again, my deepest, most profound apologies for the misunderstanding. We are truly sorry." Ibrahim nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "Let this be a lesson, Mr. Davies. True respect is not earned by status, but by the manner in which one treats all individuals, regardless of their perceived position or appearance. Humility, Mr. Davies, is a virtue that serves everyone well, from the cabin crew to the CEO, and a truly great airline understands that every passenger, no matter how unassuming, deserves the highest level of courtesy and care." He then continued down the jet bridge, his quiet dignity radiating, leaving a chastened but profoundly impacted Mr. Davies in his wake. The incident on Zenith Airlines Flight 714 became a quiet legend within the aviation industry. Chloe was immediately suspended, and following a thorough internal investigation was terminated, her blatant lack of professionalism and egregious disrespect deemed unforgivable. Mr. Davies, though he kept his job due to his swift action in rectifying the situation, underwent extensive retraining and became a staunch advocate for customer service excellence, particularly towards unassuming passengers. The airline implemented new, rigorous protocols, emphasizing empathy, respect, and attentiveness to all first-class passengers, regardless of their appearance or initial demeanor. It was a costly lesson, but one that ultimately improved their service standards. For President Ibrahim Touré, it was a small, yet significant, reminder of the world he governed. A world where appearances could be deceiving, and where true power often lay not in overt displays of authority, but in quiet strength and unwavering dignity. He continued his work, leading Xander to new heights of prosperity and influence, always remembering the lessons learned, even from the most unexpected of encounters. The incident served as a subtle, yet powerful, anecdote he would occasionally share with his cabinet and young diplomats, a reminder that humility and respect were paramount, even for those at the pinnacle of power. It underscored his deeply held belief that a leader's true strength lay not in the pomp and circumstance of office, but in the quiet integrity that commanded genuine respect, even from those who initially failed to recognize it. The story became a testament to the fact that true leadership is often found in the most unexpected places, and that dignity, once earned, cannot be easily diminished, no matter the circumstances.